And got a couple other people that are going to filter in. Got a bunch of note takers of people asking me if they can record. Jason, good to see you. Will, good to see you again, man.
Oh my.
Mr. LaFontaine. David, I had made you aware of Mike. Mike actually jumped on the call. Mike is the publisher of Editor and Publisher magazine. Mike, David's a good guy for you to have on your radar. I was going to foster an introduction for you guys at some point, but I'm accelerating it here.
I think we've seen each other like drive by on social media from time to time.
Very possible, but I did a lot of drugs in the 70s when I was in college.
You can remember the 70s, you weren't there, man.
Yeah, I know, exactly.
Exactly. Oh man, so good. Cool. I'm going to give just a minute or two more for everybody to jump in, but like I said, full house. Mike, okay, looks like you got to bail pretty soon, so that's good. Mainly, I got Mike here. Mike is observing. He and I have been talking about how to get the word out about the Media Data Collaborative, so I wanted him to get a little bit of experience of what we're doing so that he can help me figure out how to elevate the message of what we're trying to do here. So thank you for coming, Mike. I appreciate you. Mike Blender, everybody.
Yo.
And
I know Kenny real well. I just presented some of his slides at a conference I'm at here today.
Oh,
Where are you, Mike?
Oklahoma City.
Oklahoma City.
Don't ask me why.
It's an unusual place for a conference. Which one?
It's NAM. They've been around for over a century. Newspaper Association Managers. It's all the state executive directors. And
every time I think I've run into the full list of associations, I'm wrong. So.
This is one industry that has too many associations. I've editorialized on that. That's one of our biggest challenges. If the airline industry had this many associations, planes would not fly.
Well, talk to Boeing about that.
I will. I'm going to apologize. I'll be bailing in about 15, 20 minutes to go to the airport. So I'll just get the beginning.
Sounds good. That'll be perfect. I'm going to go ahead and get us started. So first thing is just a quick recap of what we're doing here. I've had, I kind of started this as a laboratory experiment, probably 6 months ago. And since then, it's just, there's been so much good. I've gotten so much positive feedback about the time. But I do like to just reconnect with the vision every time we meet, right? So Media Data Collaborative, that just means I'm assembling the people in that intersection between media, data, and revenue. And that's all kinds, you can see in this call, there's just all kinds of people represented from that world. It's people who are providers to media companies, people who are decision makers at media companies, but it's all around this idea of data and revenue because, there are just so many possibilities with it. And so I wanted to put people in a room that are experts in all these different dimensions of it. First of all, for strategic networking, because I've done business with many of the people that are in this room or gotten advice or had some kind of interaction with or sent business over to people in this room. And so it's this high level connection. And that's what I'm hearing. What I'm hearing is when I've been polling people, how do you like this time? Is it working for you? Like, what do you see as the potential? What I keep hearing is, no, I'm having incredible conversations with incredible people. And some people are actually collaborating or having contracts together based on meeting each other in these calls. And so that brings joy to my heart because that's what I wanted. So high level networking and connection and collaboration, number one. Number two is we want to be good partners to the media space. And so we're addressing, a lot of times the context is, okay, what are the problems that are facing media, especially in the realm of data? And what are we seeing in terms of solutions to those problems, whether that solution is a person or a technology or something else. This is a place for us to talk about solutions to complex problems in a way that really, how would anybody ever talk about it with a particular, I guess, effectiveness of the people in this room, who are people of integrity, people who understand media, and people who understand data. So that is the vision of the time. So one piece of housekeeping, apart from that, myself and David created something called the skills matrix, which is just this kind of rough Google sheet where we're having everybody describe themselves and their particular areas of expertise and gifting and effectiveness, so that we can better co-refer each other. And so I would encourage you, we've got a couple people fill it out. I'd like a couple people more to fill it out. And then my plan is to take what's in that document as people begin to participate with it and showcase their abilities. In the newsletter, we have that media data revenue newsletter that David Joe sends out. I'm going to start taking that information and profiling each person. And so please do fill that out, and within the next, as soon as possible. Obviously, no pressure with anything that we do, because I would like to be able to feature each of you at some point in that newsletter and get the world knowing more and more and more about your particular specialization. So that's with that. So with that, I've got a couple new members that are joining us for the first time. And so I'm going to give you a couple minutes. Jim, I'm going to start with you to just talk a little bit. Give us about 3 minutes, and I'll probably cut you off after 4. But take a few minutes and tell us about your mission and your passion.
Well, I guess the mission I have is to help digital media entrepreneurs develop sustainable business models. That's basically it. And I publish a newsletter on Substack every 2 weeks. It's called Your News Biz. And I think connect links to that were in the email I sent out. I was a reporter, then I was a head of an investigative reporting team, then I was an editor, and then I was publisher of the Baltimore Business Journal. So most of my experience has been with American City Business Journals, which has 40 business journals around the country. And so my background is business journalism. I learned the business side of media as a publisher. It was a very difficult time for me. It was not easy for a journalist to learn about, to accept that I was in the business. It was very difficult for me. But I retired from the business journals after about 20 years and I'd always wanted to live and work abroad. So then I worked with the International Center for Journalists, mostly in Latin America. I was fluent in Spanish, which is why they sent me to Latin America. And I worked in Bolivia, Mexico, Colombia, a number of other countries. And then I was invited to be a professor in Spain, and I spent 7 years in Spain working at the University of Navarra, which is known for its, they have, their communications department is focused on the industry, the media industry, and they do lots of research in the area of marketing, sales, administration of media. Maybe the most important thing lately has been the Project Oasis that I'm on the board of Sembra Media, which is focused on helping the same mission that I described earlier, helping independent media in Latin America become more sustainable. And we just published Project Oasis, Global Project Oasis, which has 3,000 media listed in it. And that should be a great prospect list from everybody on this call. Lots of independent media all over the world. So that's what I've been doing.
Yeah. Amazing. Thank you. And your timing is perfect. So 2 things I'll add on the end of that for Jim. First of all, he sent that Project Oasis database and the link to his newsletter as a reply to our thread. And so I've gotten to play with that a little bit, and everybody here, you have access to that. That's number one. Number two, the kind of person you want to send to Jim is like a kind of a young upstart publisher who's who's hungry to create a sustainable business model. You run across any of those people, send them to Jim, and Jim will take care of them. And really, I mean, initially free, right? Like that's just your heart, is to take care of those kinds of people. Could turn into a paid engagement at some point, but he's just a guy who's going to take care of those people because that's his heart.
Yeah, what I'm doing in Cleveland now is I'm working with media. I'm as a volunteer with entrepreneurs. So
yeah, perfect. So number two is going to be Greg. Greg, how do you pronounce your last name, Greg?
Crable.
Okay, got it. So Mr. Crable, yeah, can you tell mission and passion?
All right. Well, first I got to say, well, thank you very much for inviting me to the group. And I have to warn everybody, that guy on the bottom left on my screen, Robbie Haas, he's an imposter. His real name is Rob. That's the way I've known him. When Johnny was asking me to know Robbie Haas, and I'm like, I don't know. Like I talk to Rob every week. But so I've been in publishing forever. I started in publishing in 1985, I think. And I've always had a bias towards working on technology issues. And I kind of worked myself into being liaison between the business side and the technology side in different publishing endeavors. So I know how to speak the language of the marketers and the business people and the editors, and I know how to speak the language of the technology people and understand what their concerns are. So I've done some training on how to get marketing and IT to work together. For example, that's something I like to do. But what I'm doing nowadays is I'm helping publishers who have problems with their tech stack in one way or another. I like to focus on customer data platforms, but I've worked on email service providers, helping people project manage a redesign of their website, renewal retention, that kind of stuff, and any sort of lots of different publishing issues. But I try to focus on the technology side, and I try to focus on customer data platforms. I also have a lot of experience with fulfillment, which I'm not thrilled with. And it was kind of an accident that I had a lot of experience with fulfillment. When I was at Kiplinger, we had to change fulfillment companies 3 times. And so we went through multiple different RFPs, and I learned more about fulfillment than I ever wanted to know. So I know a lot about that as well. But what I really like to focus on is CDPs, helping publishers understand whether they really need one, why they need it, what their use cases would be, how to prioritize them, how to figure out, what money they're going to gain by implementing a CDP, and then work with them through the RFP process, work with them through implementation, and then usually hand off the day-to-day stuff to the technical team at the publisher. So that's what I do.
Yep. Excellent. Yep. And Greg is right now in that kind of relationship with Robbie. Like you're working on the publisher side of the relationship, and Robbie's working on the vendor side, service provider side, and you guys liaise together every week. So that's the small world we live in, right? I didn't meet Greg because of Robbie. I met Greg because I'm a monster when it comes to LinkedIn, and I find people. So I found Greg. So excellent, appreciate that. And then Greg, I think probably what I'd pinpoint about you is helping the publisher conceive of what they're trying to do in such a way that it can be distilled into RFP, right? Like that right there is I think part of your superpower. And so that's, again, one of those trigger thoughts for when to send people Greg's way is when somebody needs to get their thoughts distilled down into an RFP, and then get somebody to fulfill that. So appreciate you on that, Greg. Thanks for sharing all that. And then let's see. I think I had 2 other new people. Ginger and Jason, Ginger Neal and Jason Hana, both of them unable to make it to this one. But I'm going to keep just inviting high-level publishing people to these calls that have an interest in data, because I think this is one of the best services I can provide, is giving them access to all of you. So we'll keep doing that. With that, we're going to jump into the first question, which is, the hot button topic. Google is not deprecating the third-party cookie. I was going to have Ginger talk about that, but I tapped a few of you in this room to talk about it in her absence. And really, for me, this is me saying, hey, I want my friends to help me understand the ramifications of this for my clients, right? So y'all are serving me in a sense by helping me, giving me some perspective on that. So the first person I'd like to speak is Greg. If you don't mind, I'm going to put you, or Greg, are you still? You lose Greg?
I'm here. Yeah.
No. Oh no, there you go. Okay. Yeah. So Greg, I would love for you to maybe start with some of your initial reactions. You sent that letter out, which had a few thoughts on it, a few kind of high level general thoughts, but would love to hear your perspective.
Sure. So I'm going to drop in the chat a link to a letter that I write every month for my clients and prospects. You can look at it if you want. In my most recent letter, I talked a little bit about the Google and the third-party cookie issue. And honestly, from the beginning, I thought Google's reason for doing this, of course, they were saying that they wanted to protect privacy. I never believed that for a minute. They were trying to find a way to increase their revenue. And I thought what they were trying to do is make themselves the sole go-to source for customer data. And that was the whole motivation behind getting rid of the third-party cookie, is that everybody would have to go to Google for data. Well, for one way or another, they didn't figure it out. So now, of course, the Google decision really only refers to the Chrome browser. Safari and Firefox and other browsers have done their own things. So third-party cookies have been going away to some extent, irrespective of what Google decides to do. But Google, in their relationships with their advertisers, they couldn't figure out a good alternative, which kind of surprises me. I mean, they've got a lot of smart people there that they couldn't figure out something else, but they didn't. And so they've kind of backpedaled on this whole getting rid of the third-party cookie. So what I try to focus on with my clients is kind of don't worry too much about the details, but think about the strategic issues. So I identified 4 lessons that I think publishers should focus on as they think through this thing. The first one is quit jumping through hoops. Google has been making publishers jump through their hoops for the last 25 years, and that's absurd. I don't know if it's 25, so it's been a long time. And, publishers shouldn't be playing Google's game, and they have been for a long time, and they've been stupid to do it, and they have to quit doing that. The second thing is don't trust platforms. Platforms are always changing. First of all, their mission is to take all of your customers and replace you. And if you think otherwise, you're just kidding yourself. That's what they want to do, is to replace you and take all your customers. If they can get you to provide them some content, for a dime or something, they'll love that. But they really want to replace you and take your customers. So don't trust them. Don't rely upon them, because they change the rules all the time. So they're not a stable, reliable partner. And then number 3 is reassert control. Take your own, make your own connection with your audience through email, through first-party data. Make your connection with the audience rather than relying on somebody else's connection with your audience. And then keep an eye on any form of dependence that's cropping up in any of these kinds of relationships, whether that's podcasts or, with search engines or whatever it is. You don't want to be dependent. You want to keep your destiny in your own hands as much as possible. You can't always do it, but as a general principle, that's what you want to do. So those are kind of my 4 strategic takeaways from what we're seeing with Google.
Love it, man. Thank you for sharing that. And then I'm going to give, first of all, the publishers in the room, so that'll be Will and Kenny. I'd love to get your take on what Greg said, and then even just what you 2 have processed yourselves apart from this.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just echo my Greg in that I mean, not that I'm a cynical person, but I think that Google has a history of saying, hey, we're doing this for the users because it's good for them, but it's also kind of self-serving in a big way. I was amazed that they said they were going to do it in the first place, but then I did think about that Google has everyone's data to begin with anyway. They know exactly, they don't need the third-party cookie, and it really just tightens their grip on the industry. So I kind of felt like maybe they backpedaled because of two things. One is that, I mean, there's a lot of Google has a lot of money, but there's a lot of other people who are willing to really press the issue with Google. And I don't know what, I think in the midst of this antitrust lawsuit, it doesn't look so good. It does look like they're exercising another lever to tighten their grip on the industry. Um, so in terms of whether it's good or not for publishers, like, you know, I think a lot of times changes of this scale, I mean, if it went through, it's so difficult to really quantify what the trade-offs are. It's like the legislation in Canada with Meta. You know, there are a lot of publishers say it didn't work out for them. And maybe there's some other publishers say it did, and I don't know like it's really hard to measure what the net effect of it is. All I do know is that every single time a big change is made, especially when Google's making it, they find out a way to win. If there's any change in any delta, Google is going to find a way to capitalize on the opportunity. So maybe in a way, it's actually not such bad things that didn't change. But let's not think that they don't have something up their sleeve anyway. So that's my opinion of it. It's the wind that blows. There's only so much I can do about it. So just focus on, like Greg said, that first party data. And I guess that's why we're all here today. So.
Yeah,
And,
for me,
and thank you.
go
Yeah,
ahead. Sorry.
Thank you, Will. Yep. No, I was going to pass the mic to you, man. You go for it.
I was just, from my perspective as a tiny little publisher in the middle of nowhere, I mean, I really wasn't thinking about it too much. I mean, I thought about it for a while and then decided to ignore it because all of our targeted advertising partners on our agency side, they're all moving to device IDs and things that have nothing to do with the cookie. It makes it easier to do targeting, but it's just not, I wasn't thinking much about it. But then you brought the question up and it made me realize I have a podcast in my queue that's all about skills we've lost to technology. And the whole thing got me thinking this morning and kind of nervous. I mean, everything I do as a digital publisher is on some kind of platform that could go away and destroy my business tomorrow. I mean, heaven forbid, Kenny decides that Red Bank Green is all he needs and he doesn't want to do Broad Street anymore, and I'm stuck looking for a new, you know, and it made me realize, quite honestly, how fragile my business is. We've tried to diversify and do different things. I mean, we own radio stations, which are decidedly not, I mean, I own all of that stuff. So, but it's a completely different thing. The digital side is our most profitable side, and it's also the most exposed to risk of this kind. That's what really got me thinking.
Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate, and I just appreciate the practical, you know, the practical illustration of what I think Greg was even trying to say, which was, yeah, we got to check out this dependency here, and check and see our fragility and vulnerability. So, man, I appreciate so much the insight there. David, you had just sent a message in the chat. Do you mind giving us the clip notes on that?
Yeah. And first, Greg, I noticed in your newsletter, you name checked this. Whoops, it's not coming in there. Don't Make Me Think by Steve Krug as a UX designer. My peeps. Yeah. No, the cutting to the chase here, looking at what is the effect of deprecating the third-party cookies. And the tests that they were doing, they were seeing revenue drops, as I put in the chat, of like 60%. Which for a digital publisher, you take away 60% of their revenue, we call that going out of business. Yeah. Now, if you look at places where the ad ops guys gather, earlier this year in January, people were posting things like, you know, how come everybody isn't freaking out? To which the replies were, we are freaking out. Oh my God, everything's on fire. We're all going to die. And then other people would be saying, well, the third party cookies were going out anyway. This take here that I'm seeing is kind of aligned with what Kenny was saying, that Google's moves are definitely to benefit them, but I'm not sure they're offensive so much as they are defensive. Ever
Mhm.
since Austria started all this rolling, when Austria basically declared Google Analytics illegal, and that's where the whole
Mhm.
PR started. If you know, oh, history lesson. They've been afraid of Europe and then by contagion other areas just declaring their core business model of tracking uh, to be completely illegal. And so they're trying to like do whatever they can, put up smoke screens or, you know, these Potemkin villages of, hey, look, we're actually going to be a good corporate citizen now. We care about your privacy. Don't look behind the curtain. Uh, to try to keep Europe and other places like, you know, California or Canada or wherever else of just declaring, hey, look, you can't track anymore. At which point a Google ad is no more effective than an ad that you put on a billboard.
Yeah.
So they cannot let that happen. Otherwise they're done. What this, you know, announcing that it is and then the reversal on it means, I guess I could say that if you wanted to be completely Machiavellian about it, what they wanted to do was to push everybody off of third-party cookies and onto only Google products. But then they got scared by antitrust, and then they were like, "Well, no, you can still have your third-party cookies." Meanwhile, they've shoved a whole bunch of people into only using Google cookies. That could be.
Yeah. Yeah.
That may ascribe a little bit too much malevolence and also planning to what's essentially a reactive strategy on Google's part. They're just trying
Yeah.
to make themselves look like they care about privacy so that they don't get hammered. Um, as far as what can replace them, device level tracking. Um, is actually more accurate. But Apple gives you the opportunity to block device level tracking. Google obviously probably does not. And on Android devices, since those are the vast majority of devices in use around the world right now, I think device level tracking is probably still going to have some oomph. I posted into the email chain today, another
Yep.
alternative to Google Analytics that I'm starting to look at and see if it's worth attention there right now. Jury's still kind of out on that one. It's called Plausible Analytics, which sounds really good to me because having dealt with both Google Analytics and Facebook Analytics and finding that they absolutely do not agree. And then when you pull the audits from an e-commerce site, you got a third number completely. So any kind of analytics solution that might provide a little bit more accuracy to me sounds like something at least, you know, worth poking with the stick a little bit. I've been
All
talking.
right.
Anybody else got any ideas or opinions? Want to jump in here?
Well, I was going to try to take us on a swan dive towards practicality, right? So again, I want to leave this call and be able to say to my publishers who ask me, this, do nothing or do this thing, right? Or do these two or three things. So does anybody feel like they have a grasp enough on, because what we're talking about right now is it's super important, right? It's like posture. Right. Well, what's the overall posture that a publisher should have towards this towards this thing that happened? Does anybody else have any practical? It's fair to say don't do anything, or it's fair to say do this one or two things. But I'd like to hear and let me give preferential space for people I haven't heard from: Robbie, Jake, and Jason, and Blair on that. And then if they don't have anything, then it's free reign.
I come at this probably from a different viewpoint than a lot of people on here. I work across a couple of really big consumer publishers and then a variety of B2B publishers. And I think about the journey, and Greg is very familiar with this with the CDP, with the way that the technology has evolved, in the cross section of identity management as it relates to devices and individuals and people and consuming what they want. And the technology is advanced in such a way that cookies actually are somewhat, at least the way that the cookies that Google defined, are somewhat irrelevant. Because with the proper setup, someone could come to your site, they go away, they clear their cookies, they come back, and you're still going to know who they are. The platform that I work in most often is a platform called Blueconic. And so it really, and this is what I've been the past 2 years been working with publishers on, is kind of building this cookieless environment that doesn't skip a beat and actually really enhances their business model. Because at the end of the day, there's always two sets of data. There's verified and there's modeled. And as much as Google wants to say, or any other big data company wants to say, that their data is 100% correct, everyone knows 40% of that is modeled, because it's based on unverified points, but more where they've been tracked going across the web. And so as you think about publishers, if they can take that step to think about how they could get a CDP in their environment, they've really kind of taken a lot of that power away from Google, even Apple, who strips their cookies out. Firefox strips their cookies out, because they've solved that one-to-one link. They've then taken a step closer to be able to do device attribution, where that if someone's on a mobile versus a tablet versus a desktop or laptop, you can consolidate that. And more recently, what I've been really getting into is identity management on the broad scale. So how do you link in to an identity graph that and there's multiple different types, and there's a large variety of quality out there. But when somebody comes to your site, proactively assigning, and this can be as privacy compliant as you want, but proactively assigning them either a person ID, which could link to a group of hashed emails, or taking it all the way down to an unencrypted email, which tends to get a little bit cost prohibitive. But it really allows you that benefit of saying that as a publisher, I've got a very large footprint. I've solved the hardest thing of actually solving for publishing good content. And if you still have content coming your way, that means Google's not deemed you the enemy, who's publishing only AI generated content. And in that process, you have that ability to build out very segmented audiences that, from an engagement standpoint, it could lead to 2-3 more clicks, which if you're depending on supply side programmatic revenue, that's huge. On the flip end, if you want to control that experience and then provide access to your data, that's the other. And then there's a whole underlining ability to say that if you wanted to provide less traditional access to your audience, to just use as an example of like a TransUnion, who have built business models off of linkage data, still being very privacy compliant, but matching on like audiences, hashed audiences, and then being able to be compensated to say that this person is still active. I think there's still that which was going to die because Google was taking away the cookies, that will have a whole new renewed effect into the marketplace. Where it's a little less prevalent is in the B2B space, but I think overall, I am very bullish that publishers actually have an advantage here that others don't, for those reasons.
Yeah.
Very long-winded, sorry.
Man, I appreciate that. Thank you, Robbie. And I think you can probably tell by hearing him. Robbie is neck deep in CDP implementation, and how to use the functionality of customer data platforms for revenue generation and for increased engagement. And when I say CDP, I don't want to assume everybody knows. That's customer data platforms. And so, right, like basically something that sits underneath all of your public facing channels, including your website, email, everything, and begins collecting and compiling all of the information about the people's interactions and engagements and creating intelligence. Is that a fair, Robbie? I hope I didn't butcher that, but I think that's a good definition of CDP. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that, and I'm going to extrapolate from that. My advice to my publisher is find a path into CDP, because CDP itself, correctly configured, removes you, makes Google's powers irrelevant to a degree. Is that, can I translate? That's me translating into 8th grade. Yeah.
I think that if I'll just take the position that I'm selling to an advertiser, because an advertiser is a lifeline of revenue blood to a publisher. You can say to an advertiser that if you're relying on Google search as one, you're fishing in a big sea, versus if you are interested in these very specific behaviors, there's going to be no waste in your advertising spend with us, and we have the ability to not only serve it on site, but because we have the data, we can follow them off site intelligently by synchronizing the data with the audience. So I think there's
if they have CDP correctly configured. If they have CDP correctly configured, that becomes possible. That's yep. I think someone else is about to talk. Who was that? That
was me. That was me, Greg. So I was going to say that Rob is right that with a CDP, it can help your direct sales with advertisers substantially, because you can offer better packages. I think the other thing when you're talking with a publisher about a CDP is that if they really want to get single customer records and unify all their data, they need to have logins on their website. Because you can do various things to establish identity without logins, but it doesn't really get it. If you really want to get identity about people, you need to have people sign up. That's the bottom line.
All right. Appreciate you, Greg. And then Jason, I saw you a couple times. I've seen you nodding your head and smiling and reacting. So I'm going to give you the mic if you want it.
I don't have much to say. I think, it's been covered pretty well. I think for me, just the one angle that I would come from, I think sometimes we all get lost where we live in this world. And what Greg and Robbie just mentioned, when you're talking to whether a direct advertiser or whatnot, it's like, how do we distill these thoughts to be able to in something that's easily digestible to clients, right? It's easy for us to say, hey, CDP is great. We understand this. We understand it's tracking. It's better. We're talking peer to peer. That's fantastic. We live in this world. Somebody who's off the street, and you're telling, if you're telling them, yeah, Google's no good. Simplifying here, of course. Google's no good. We've got this. What's their reaction is going to be? What? No, you're only saying that because you're biased. So that, to me, that's a big challenge. Is what's the digestible nugget that you can easily use to market, slogan, whatever you want, how to phrase it.
Yeah,
that to me is the angle that we really haven't covered.
Right, which is kind of Kenny's sweet spot, I think. Right, like Kenny, you found a way to go to the local. Who's your meat meat salesman in your market?
Stu the butcher.
Stu the butcher, man. Like Stu the butcher is a forever fan, because you've been able to bring him exactly what Jason's talking about, which is outcomes, right? Yeah. Like outcomes that he can feel and see and touch.
Right, and it can be a challenge to do, but if you can send, in Stu's case, if you can actually get a person to show up and say, I came here because of Red Bank Green, the thing that you bought, that's outrageously powerful, because advertising just has that way about it, and that sometimes you're spending money and you don't know if it's working, but if you can do that, it goes a long way.
Well, and that was one of my big takeaways. Like when David first posted the piece about the loss of revenue, my first thought was, both from my experience as a publisher and the publishers that I, think are really kind of some of the smartest out there right now, and a lot of them obviously are smaller groups. And it's just like they've got so much owned and operated. And I just feel like the ones that are so reliant on Google and are the ones that really should be scared no matter which way things go. So the ones that are really doing it right, and I think Kenny obviously has got the right model, and I think about our community impact and some of the others, and I just, to me, that was my big thought immediately with, is that, well, you wouldn't be nearly as scared if you weren't so reliant on, this huge behemoth. So, for what that's worth.
No, it's worth a lot, Blair. I appreciate you, man. And then my last person, Jake, you just came back. So Jake, did you have any thoughts as we kind of start to put this conversation again, trying to runway it down to practical applications for any publishers who are watching this later?
Right. I mean, I think the most powerful thing I've heard is, creating an analogy that, your product is what you're producing, not the platform that you're on. And so as much as you can be platform agnostic, I mean, that's always going to be key. And I mean, I'm not, I think if you're approaching it that way holistically, then it doesn't matter what's happening with the cookie. It doesn't matter. I mean, yeah. I mean, I can't add more than what everybody else has said besides that. So
sure, that's good, man. Well, this is super clarifying. So again, for any publishers or media professionals who are watching this later, your guides when it has to do with CDP or pivoting into CDP or figuring out, how much, what platform should I use? Blue Comic, Omeda, Lytics, I can't just rattle them off probably like Robbie could. Your people in this call specifically who guide publishers down that road are Robbie Haas, Jason Yee, and Greg Krebel. Those are your folks, and they each have a different flavor and a different specialty and a different posture within that conversation. But those are specifically the people to talk to about this issue, because there is a big problem, right? We're not talking about the 2,000-pound gorilla in the room, which is, if I'm a small to mid-sized publisher, how do I freaking afford a CDP? They're expensive, right? And so that's kind of my challenge to you, Robbie, Jason, and Greg is, if people start coming your way, is there a way to make this relevant to the small to mid-sized publisher? I'm not asking you to answer this question now because it would take up the rest of our time. So I'm not asking you to answer the question, but I am asking you to be thinking about, because a lot of the people that are going to be exposed to this, I would think, are the small to mid-sized publisher who need some sort of an answer here on how to take control of their own audience.
Can I give you a 1 minute answer?
Sure, Greg, man, I'm timing you.
Okay.
You're a brave man. You got courage.
Okay, so the 1 minute answer is most CDPs cost too much for a lot of small publishers, but you don't necessarily need a full CDP, and there are other CDP-like things that can fill in a lot of the gaps. So that's another option to pursue. Rather than getting an entire CDP, find some of the little pieces that you need and do those things.
Right, and so I'm assuming you're thinking about HubSpot there. You're thinking about Salesforce.
It depends entirely on their use cases and what they need. But I mean, there's different technologies out there that not a full-fledged CDP that can fill in some of the gaps that people need for their specific use case in their environment.
And I'll just add that, right? Johnny, we talked about this briefly yesterday. There is no one size fits all. I mean, it's exactly what Greg says. Like, so much of this is you need to find out you generally need to find out what that client is. And so that's where that discovery is, right? Because it would be disservice to recommend like Greg said, just like, chances are they only need, you need to find out what's vital for them and then do recommendation for the best solution.
Awesome. Yep. I love it. Hey, this has been good. So we're going to switch gears a little bit here. Now I do this section, which I think eventually is going to be the most powerful section of the call, but it's the needs and offers side of the call. But I'm not necessarily going to go directly there. But I would like needs, for example. I had a need for some very targeted email, right? Like some very I needed for a project I'm working on. I needed somebody to produce some email for me, some email addresses for me, filtered down by a variety of characteristics, and I needed those emails to come in at like 25-30 cents a record. That's what I needed, right? Well, I talked, Matt Manning, without getting into the details of kind of what our arrangement is, Matt Manning is a person within this group that I tap for those kinds of requests. Can you assemble a database for me based on specific criteria? And that's all Matt Manning does all day, every day. So quick shout out to Matt Manning, right? So I come to him with a need. Matt has the supply. Matt is my go-to guy for that kind of a project, right? So to give you an example of a data need, right? I'm using this group for the exact same thing that I'm inviting the rest of you to use this group for, which is I have a hardcore complex data need. Let me bring it to this group of experts and see if there's somebody here that can help me. So with that definition of need in mind, did anybody come today with a need? Raise your hand if you've got a need. Okay, so nobody, which is fine. And then anybody come here with a specific offer, right? So there's things I need, and then there's things that I offer. Jim told me what he offers is for a young upstart entrepreneurial publisher who needs help getting to that place of critical mass where they have an effective business model that works and that supports them. They can talk to Jim, and Jim will help them all day, right? That's an offer that he makes. Let's see here. Is there anybody else here with an offer? I've been working with David LaFontaine on his offer, which is, it'll be probably a $500 offering, something like that, where he'll come in for a publisher, do an analysis of their UX and their underlying goals and objectives that are driving the UX, and then give them an action plan of what they need to work on to bring their UX in line with their goals and desires. I probably butchered that, David, but like that's an offering that you're creating. Anybody here come with a particular offering that they want to discuss? Just show of hands. Tammy, all right, sweet. Let's leave it for a second. Five more seconds if you want to get in on this. All right, so it's just Kenny. So let's go ahead and start with Kenny, and then I'll close this up with something else.
Right.
But
I will say I'm going to start with a need really quick because I realized I should have talked to David about this last week because we hopped on a call. So David, I don't know how much you know about BroadStreet and the dashboard, but the user experience it's pretty good, but there are some areas that could really use some focus and work. And it's like one of those, it's just like, how do we make things fewer clicks, more usable for the end user? Because ever since I started using it on a daily basis from Red Bank Green standpoint, some things just drive me crazy. And now I really empathize with my end users. I'm like, oh man, I could have done a better job there. So I have two offers. Is anybody going to Chicago for Lion, local independent online news? I know, David, you are too, Jacob. All right, cool. So Will Hill, he's, I think, had the hop, but I'm hosting this event called Double Header, and it's kind of like, it's the day prior to Lion kicking off. If anybody knows Dylan Smith of Tucson Sentinel, a lot of like the Lion OGs, so they're going. I got about like 15 people so far. I haven't publicized it, but if you would like to go, I'll shoot you the Eventbrite link. So basically, it's just a few hours of lightning talks, and then we all go to a Cubs game. I bought a group tickets, and so it's pretty much at cost. So if you want to drop your email address, if you want to do that and you want to drop your email address in the chat, I'll shoot you the link because it just occurred to me you guys would be perfect. Oh, and also you're invited to give a lightning talk too. So we're gonna do 5 to 10 minute lightning talks. So if there's something like that you think will help push other publishers forward or people in media forward who will be going to that, you're invited to give a lightning talk. The other thing is for analytics. David was talking about analytics. If you want to try Broadsheet's analytics, it's free. It's going to be free forever. We actually, when everyone was really complaining about GA4, I was like, we already do all of the analytics for the advertising side, so we could just kind of repurpose that for analytics. So if you want a very simplified approach to site analytics, you can still run GA and Broadsheet. We call it Flux Analytics. There are actually some embedded Back to the Future references because it was fun. We never told anybody that. And you'll see if you can find them. But anybody wants to, again, drop their email address in, I'd be happy to just set you up with a free account. Tommy's already setting it up for Jacob, Greg, and David. I threw you in there just for good measure. But if anybody else, Blair, awesome, I'll do that.
If we get it at 88 miles an hour, does it leave like little flaming tracks across the screen?
That'd be pretty cool. So, yeah, but speaking of good ideas like that, if there is something that you think would be a simple win for Flux Analytics, you'll see it gives you some insight into how many people are using ad blockers on your site, for example. That could be useful, and you can also drill down into a specific page really easily, and you can search in a much easier way than Google Analytics. So it was kind of like based on my own needs of like, all right, if I had something that was easy and I could use really right away. So those are the two offers. It looks like it's Jim. Jim's next.
Yeah.
Go for it.
You're on mute. Okay.
If any of your clients have Spanish-speaking media or anything like that, I can help them with that. My Spanish is fluent, very good, and if you run into anything like that, I'm available.
Man, that's awesome. Thank you, Jim. And then David, you had even talked about as relevance to Kenny, some of those international markets being something. And I don't know if you guys have talked about that, Kenny, but that might be your entree into international. David and Jim would be an entree into international markets.
We actually have started working with more Spanish-speaking media, mainly because Adam on our team is fluent in Spanish, and and then I think me and David were talking last week about actually internationalizing the dashboard, which unfortunately we haven't done yet, but it's on the to-do list.
Yeah, we've got that on the backlog. Full disclosure, the effort that Jim was talking about with Sember Media, that's my wife's organization, and Jim did amazing work coming on in and copy editing 125 pages of that report. And he did some really good heavy lifting there. It's launched this week. My wife's down in Buenos Aires right now talking with Google about a bunch of other stuff. What I wanted to get to was what Greg said, which was about getting people to log into your site. And that's actually a really interesting insight, because when people log in, they click that little I accept button. And at that point, you can track them because they come on in there and they're logged in. And each time they come to the site, you're tracking them and their behavior. And you can really start slicing and dicing and getting really good behavior on there. Where that gets interesting to me on the design standpoint is, what do you have to do? What has to be your offer to get people to want to sign up? What is it that you have on your site that makes people want to just not be drive-bys, but actually sign up? And there's a number of examples. Bring it back around once again to the Project Oasis report of sites that have really interesting things, discussions or things like that, where you have to like sign in as somebody or as an avatar to participate in the community. And at that point, you can start really getting some really good data The other part of it would be, and this is a question, does anybody have insight into, or have you had trouble explaining to publishers why you want the data and how you can sell it to an ad exchange that then wants to target the people that you've got the data on? Is that an easy sell, or is that something that takes a little bit? Kenny, you together would know that, but anybody.
I don't think it's.
No,
I don't think
let it sit. Let it sit. Yeah.
I don't think it's a
Go ahead,
difficult. And one use case, David, to what you're talking about with the sign in is we're working with a TV station right now, and I think we're going to make this an offering to any publishers. But one of their requests was when people were doing like best of voting, best of reader's choice, that they had to sign into their site, and then we would take that and then we would make that an automatic sign in for best of, as opposed to like we normally did the authentication through our system. So they wanted them to sign up and then do that pass through. So we're making that happen for them. So that's a use case of kind of giving people an incentive. I mean, it's not maybe the greatest incentive, but if they want to vote, they're going to have to become a member of that TV station's site.
Nice. Yeah.
And I'm gonna cut it here, David. Sorry, but so let's continue that conversation offline. So if there's anybody who has anything, we're about 3 minutes left, and I have a couple requests myself. So I would say I love that question, David. And I'd love to see you pose that question in the email thread and get 3 or 4 more answers on it from people. But my final ask is, I feel like I've gotten an infusion of just joy and excitement for this group, as we're coming back into the fall and what's possible with this group. Even just talking to people, because like I said, I took some time to just talk to people and say, what's this group doing for you? And it's doing what I had hoped and more. Right. So one thing I would ask, if you know, like now that you know what you all know what it's like here, what this is and what's going to happen. We're going to get pretty practical, and we're going to talk about things that I don't know that there's any venue for people to talk about what we're talking about here that exists. And so it's special. If you know specifically publishing executives who are data forward in their thinking, bring them, invite them. I'm finding that I'm getting mileage out of inviting people into these kinds of groups, specifically publishing executives, which I'm going to do more and more of. I'm going to bring more and more people here because it's such a blessing to them, and they get to see us in the wild, right? They get to see us in the wild wrestling with issues. And what better social proof is there? I don't know if that's the right word, but what better evidence is there that you know what you're talking about than being in a group of people and wrestling through issues like what we're doing? So bring your people, right? Like bring your people, bring your clients. And I realize, man, that you might not feel comfortable, and that's fine if you don't. But also if you know other people who belong in this room with us, you know who they are, right? Like if you know people who kind of belong in this room, let's be really generous and liberal about bringing those people into the conversation. Introduce them to me. I'll spend time with them, and then get them invited to the group, and then we're just going to continue to grow. I don't want to get the group so big that at any given day it's more than 15 people, right? Like if we start hitting that ceiling, then we might need to figure some things out, because I still want it to feel intimate enough where everybody gets a chance to speak. But what leads us to 15 people on a regular basis is probably 40 or 50 people signed up. That's a big ask to have people come every month, right? So anyway, that's my ask to you is bring more people, bring more homies that fit in this space, and be liberal about it. And I think other than that, I think that's the last. I mean, the final ask is just a reiteration of my previous ask, which is access that spreadsheet that David created and that I kind of helped him with, and let us know more about your expertise so I can profile you in our newsletter. And we're at time. So if there's any questions, or if anybody wants to spill over and have buffer, I'm gonna make space for that. Like I'm always a pretty big stickler on stopping, but I want to give people a chance if they want to keep going. So So feel no requirement to stay. See us all waving goodbye? We're waving goodbye right now. See you later. Bye-bye. Bye-bye to anybody who wants to go. But anybody who wants to hang out and has other questions, or David, if you want to continue with your question after we've given a space for any other things that people might want to discuss. But it's at this point, it's me, you, and Jake.
Yep.
Which I like. I
Bunch
like
of-
me, you, and Jake. That's a good combo, man. Like, you know, the three of us. But yeah, let's. I'm gonna go ahead and stop recording at this point. There's my record.